It's another Tuesday. That means we've got another episode of Superman and Lois, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your thoughts on episode 4 of Superman and Lois, as well as the show in general up to this point in time. This is a spoiler review, so feel free to spoil down below in the comment section. And if you haven't watched the show and you're worried about spoilers, don't watch this video because it will be filled with specific plot points. If you don't know, I have been reviewing the show week to week up to this point in time. It looks like I'm going to keep doing that. You can check some of those out right up here if you want to check out my thoughts on the previous episodes. With that said, the way this is going to work, I will give my general thoughts on the episode, and then I'll talk about some specific plot lines as we go through this, kicking things off with my general impressions. And once again, another solid episode that I enjoyed. There are actually quite a few kind of plot lines running in this one. You have multiple conflict, villain type things happening that need to be resolved, which is somewhat the plot line of the episode in terms of Clark's arc, in that he's being pulled in so many different directions and not fully able to deliver on all the promises that he's making to everyone. And on a personal what the show's been doing thus far is taking very real world things that husbands, fathers have to deal with, and applying them to Clark Kent's Superman. And that continues into this episode as you get the overly involved in-law that has an opinion on everything, except it's much more complicated than that because he's a general that works with Superman and he's Lois Lane's dad. So there's all kinds of complications that go with that. And just finding, once again, a way to continue the interesting dynamics that are central to this show. It's a little bit lighter on the action. One of the lighter episodes in terms of the action. But that is the nature of this show, especially we're 4 episodes in, we're seeing that this is not, it didn't promise to be a slam bang action packed show, and it's tough to do that with Superman on a TV show budget. But it's very much, it's not that. We've got a little bit of Superman action and a lot of family drama going on in these. And that's what you saw in this episode. And kind of just moving down the plot lines that we've seen up to this point in time in ways that kind of add a little bit of intrigue and starting to tie them together just a little bit. Especially as you move into the final little reveals of this episode, the stuff that's said in the last 10 minutes, and the Morgan Edge, what's he up to? We kind of suspected there's something was going to be along the way, probably related to Kryptonian stuff, and then that seemed to be exactly where this is headed, is that he's aware of some stuff that gives people powers, and then our many plot lines are starting to come together through that. So, another solid episode. Maybe didn't wow me as much as some of the other ones, but then again, when I started the show, I had pretty low expectations, tried to dampen any expectations, and so then once you get used to the fact, like, yeah, I know I'm probably going to really enjoy this, then you're not surprised by how much you like it anymore. And so some of that, I think, it's not that the quality dipped or anything like that, but that you're just kind of proper expectations for it. One new concern being raised by this episode is that as soon as the guy's arms started to shake, start getting Smallville vibes in the bad sense. There's a lot of things I love about Smallville, but then it turned into, or at least for like 3 seasons, there's kryptonite rocks here, and therefore new person got powers because of it this week. And, they were standing by bugs while near kryptonite. Now they have bug powers. This girl eats a lot of food and she got near kryptonite. Therefore, she loves to eat things. That was actually Amy Adams was that episode. And it's fun that she became Lois Lane eventually. And she was in Smallville 10 years before that. But start getting a little bit of fear that I hope they don't overplay that plot line of like the exact same gimmick that they used for Smallville. That makes me pretty nervous when we're already heading down that path. So I hope they don't lean too much into that. With that said, let's just kind of walk through some specific plot lines, what I liked, what I didn't like, what I'm getting from all of this. So at our kicking things off, we've got a football game going on. I guess it started off with kind of a Morgan Edge setup sequence of him learning some stuff, putting in motion his arc, what he's up to. And we'll talk more about him later on. But they'll go to a football game, and Jonathan thinks that he's being called to play, but in fact it was Jordan. Jordan ends up having this great little moment in the game where he takes someone out. Grandpa Sam is up in the stands, sees his weakling little grandson suddenly taking out guys much bigger than him, and he goes, that guy's got power. They just moved to Smallville. Ta-da! Figuring this out. So then, as soon as they go home, he kind of confronts that, like, guys, your son has powers. You didn't think you should tell me that? Like, is this why you moved here? Is this why you're distracted? Is this why all this other stuff is going on? And kind of his really putting his cards on the table of like, you're Superman. People have noticed you're not in Metropolis as much. And we're getting chatter. Things are being moved. There's a lot of things happening because you're not around. Your priorities are a problem for me. And it sets up several different things because him as general guy saying all of this, okay, fair point. That's a fair thing for working colleagues in that space to say to one another. But he's saying it as a guy with family information. So it's the reason that working with family is always really complicated because the relationship dynamics are tricky. You're never just one role with someone. You're always multiple roles. And as soon as there's multiple roles that someone's in your life, it's messy, especially when it's family. And you constantly see that with the Sam to Superman and Clark. When he's talking to Superman, there's usually respect and he appreciates what he can do for him. He's invaluable. And then as soon as he's talking to Clark, he's constantly frustrated that this is the guy that's married to his daughter and the person that is the father to his grandkids. And it's because of that conflicting roles in life that leads to all of that. And that's much of the tension of this episode. And I very much appreciated all of that. So much of, if you're familiar with a lot of my Arrowverse critiques, it's that the conflicts that they tend to have between people, like on Arrow, there were constantly times where people screaming about trust and like, you got to trust one another, you got to work together as a team and shouting that. But it was a very juvenile 13-year-old understanding of what trust meant. It wasn't like it was people that there was no actual exploration on any sort of mature or adult level of what trust between adults means and how that would interact and what trustworthiness and what, any of that. It was just like screaming about trust, this very simplistic version of it. But when you get to this show, there's actual reasonable conflicts there and like relatable things. As someone that's married, you constantly are having to figure out boundaries with family members and having awkward conversations about when people are overstepping boundaries and who should and shouldn't have certain conversations, who's the best person to do things like that. And that's what this show's doing, like real, actual conflict that adults have. I very much appreciate that about this show. And they're done in a way that makes sense. They feel organic and real, even though you're dealing with Superman in scenarios that are totally unrelatable for normal humans. They just happen to be in this very weird situation where they can't tell everyone, hey, General Lane can't be Superman's boss because of who his daughter... Like, you can't actually have the conversation that would undo all this stuff, so you find yourself just like in this really messy situation. It's interesting. It's interesting that they found a way to make Superman kind of relatable in certain ways like that. So then we also have this kind of plot line running throughout the episode about Lois Lane wants to run this story about Morgan Edge, but Morgan Edge's, I don't even know what the role of the person is, but person shows up at the Daily, that's not Daily Planet, whatever the name of the Smallville paper is, the Gazette, shows up there and is like, we're going to sue you, you're under contract, you can't run this thing you were going to run. And it kind of basically silences Lois. It puts her in a position where she can't share anything. She can't confront Morgan Edge while she's trying to do this investigation. She's realizing like, okay, I could go to, like, we could be bankrupt if I play this wrong. So I need to be very, very careful. And Morgan Edge is coming to town for the final appeal for the city council to approve him going to these mines. She's super skeptical of this, and she needs someone to speak against it to try and stop it, get certain ideas out there. She can't write the paper, an article about it, and she can't speak about it for the same reason. She really wants Clark to be the one to help her with this at this city council meeting that's coming up. So this kind of leads to the intersecting plot lines coming about. We're introduced to another member of the football team who has a broken arm. That apparently he broke his arm at the party from the pilot, where there's a big, gigantic explosion took place because of Jordan gaining his powers. Because of the explosion, he breaks his arm, so he can't play properly, and this causes a lot of tension for him, the team, and everything like that. So we see him at home with this cast on his arm, and he starts like trying to rip it off, and his arm just starts shaking like crazy, super fast, and clearly he's gaining powers or something's going on with him. And immediately, I got nervous as to where this was going, and it went exactly where I thought it was going, which was there's Kryptonian rocks of sorts in the town that are going to give him powers. Like, I don't hate the idea if used in moderation. I don't hate the idea if used intelligently. Smallville really just mined that plot device so heavily. And it's a 20-year-old technique of like, okay, we want to do 22 episode seasons, so we need to find a way to come up with a bunch of villains. So what's our mechanism to have a freak of the week? And you had these shows, they would have the running meta thing, the big overarching plot line, and then there'd be some plot device that led to the freak of the week. Buffy the Vampire Slayer did it, Smallville did it, a bunch of these shows did that. And I do not at all think that is the right direction for this show to go in the year 2021. Like we did that 20 years ago, and even 20 years ago, we rolled our eyes at it a little bit. That's like one of the weakest aspects of Smallville was the goofy explanations for how these same exact reason that people kept gaining powers in a small town, but 40 people ended up getting freak weird powers, and it's literally like, I was buy some rocks and a Diet Coke can, so I gained Diet Coke powers. Like, it's that sort of thing played out so many times that it was a little bit, so hope they don't go too far down that plot line, but we'll see. We'll see where it goes. Thus far, they've earned my trust. To our lesson on trust, they've behaved in a manner that is reliable and makes me be able to predict what they're going to do. Therefore, I trust that they're not going to mess it up too bad or do something too frustrating with it. But it was a red flag of sorts. So, sets up kind of our next plot line of there's a criminal in town that because of Superman not being around, they decided they want to transfer him. He's being transferred, and he starts to he's making this weird thing while he's talking that's very noticeable. Like, as you're watching it, you're like, why is he talking like that? That must be part of his character. That is such a distinct quirk. Where exactly is this going? And then after about a minute of, he's like, you might have noticed this. I'm not actually smacking my lips. Actually, it's this thing. Turns out it's part of his escape plan. Running parallel to this, they're having a football meeting, and arm guy gets yelled at by the coach for going to a party, getting drunk, and getting injured. He goes to the bathroom. Jonathan follows him to check on him, and we see him in the bath stall like he's shaking. Cast explodes off of his arm, and so Jonathan's like, what on earth is going on? So he clicks the button or he starts making, not because he clicked the button. I got that reversed. He's like, oh no, we need some help. So Clark hears that, starts heading towards him. General Sam, sees guy escaping, clicks button, and Clark sees Jonathan there. Jonathan's like, hey, I need you in here. So he goes with his son, not with the general. And so delays Clark just a little bit. So by the time he shows up, the guy's escaped. And Sam's probably not going to be the happiest about the way this plays out. But so Grandpa's been staying at their house for a little bit. So they have this little scene where the twins are walking outside. Grandpa walks up to them, and he basically puts all the cards on the table of what he's thinking. He says, hey kids, Jordan, I noticed you got superpowers. That's cool, but you got a big responsibility. Most importantly, your dad has a big responsibility, and you guys need to stop distracting him. Which it's like, it's such an interesting dynamic because pragmatically speaking, he's making a valid point. He's violating so many boundaries in doing so. Like, he's doing the thing that he believes to be right, that he thinks is what needs to happen, which is always the reason that hovering grandparents over in-laws and things like, the reason they always think that they're right. That's the reason they do. That's why they're violating boundaries, not because they think they're wrong, not because they're nefarious, but going to someone else's kids to say, hey, don't ask your dad for help because what I want him for is more important. Bad move for a grandparent to do when the parent is not around. That is not cool. So he does that and creates a scenario to where they're doubting whether they should ask their dad for help. Parallel to this, Superman, or not parallel to, I'm trying to remember the exact way all the plot lines. My notes, since so many stories always happen in different orders to each other, my notes aren't exactly in order. But so that night, Superman's trying to track down villain guy at the same time as the meeting thing is taking place. And Lois shows up and she can't go on stage. And she's like trying to call Clark. He's not showing up because he's looking around for escaped villain guy. And escaped villain guy, he doesn't catch him. And Clark doesn't show up to the meeting. So council votes Morgan Edge is going to get to mine for whatever he's looking for in this town. So Lois is mad. They have a nice little conversation between the two of them. Another thing, like the show just seems to do well, is you have characters that have frustrations, but they know that their frustration isn't entirely reasonable. They have a legitimate disappointment in, they're annoyed, they're frustrated, but they understand the other person's side. They don't assume the worst to the other side. Once again, going back to frustrations with Arrowverse in general, of every time there's a misunderstanding, people like go off the handle and just scream at people, which is not the way that some of these people would interact. Some people are like that, but everyone isn't like that. And some of these shows, like everyone, anytime there's a violation, just kind of go off on them and it's exaggerated. It's like, that's not an earned reaction. Whereas here, Lois knows that her husband is Superman. She knows that whatever he was doing was important and it could save lives. She just really believes in what she's doing. So, of course, she's mad and frustrated, but she knows that she shouldn't be mad. And so it's like a conflict inside of her that makes sense. There's a dueling emotions in reasoning and logic in the head that is so human, so normal. I appreciate that. Like, the conflict feels earned, and you feel it because it's more authentic. 4 episodes in, and they've kind of kept that up of like authentic emotions and reactions to things. Jonathan is kind of in the same situation as Lois of he's very frustrated by being in Smallville. He's very disappointed he's so conflicted about the fact that he wants his brother to succeed and find friends and be successful at something. And at the same time, he's like, this guy doesn't even know how to play football, but he's getting the winning ball. And that's weird. This has been my thing for years and I've loved it and I've been working at it. And now he's the one that's getting all the praise. So he's conflicted about all of it. It's never as simple as just kind of one emotion and like, my brother's successful and I'm not, I'm mad. No, he's not that. He still cares about his brother. He gets it. He understands the other logic. It doesn't mean he doesn't have feelings and emotions and disappointment though. It's balanced the way it should be. So, we kind of leads to kind of our final 3 plot lines running in the last little section. The boys go to a party with all the kids from school. Lois Lane goes and hangs out with Lana. And then Superman is hanging out with General Sam. So everyone's kind of paired up with some way that gets a little bit interesting. At the party, Jordan has a little conversation with his lady friend about, kind of, does he like playing football? Does he not? She's worried about his brother because clearly he's not fitting in and he's used to being popular. And so what should they do about that? And Jonathan, who seems to be someone that's very inclined to try and help people, like just seems to be good-natured, sees broken arm guy having he like his arm starts shaking, he breaks a table, so he's confronted by someone about it who'd bullied him earlier. Jonathan shows up. This guy's clearly wigging out, so he runs outside. So Jonathan follows him to try and help him out. Then Sam and Superman are doing research and having their still conflict back and forth about priorities, where they get a signal, they go to track it down, and basically it's a trap. Our creepy villain guy of the week has a ray gun and uses his ray gun to kind of knock Superman down. And in the middle of all of this, you've also got guy freaking out in the woods. And Jordan, thinking he has powers, like, that's not the only one that can use powers. Grandpa told us not to waste Dad's time. I got this, runs over. He does not got it. And so the guy's like really wigging out. And so eventually starts pushing the button after a while has passed. Superman's able to escape from Ray Gun guy and shows up, captures shaky guy, flies him somewhere. So I think this is where kind of maybe the episode didn't kind of wow me as much, is that it's trying to progress a lot of plot points, but it has to be, nothing really gets developed. So we have Arm Shake guy, that he's just there to show that people are getting powers from this stuff. Like, it's just there for that purpose. He's not really villainous, he's just a guy that's there and shaking. You have creepy criminal guy that has he's like this mastermind that came up with this very elaborate plan to escape, to trap Superman, because he figured out Superman's not around because he's vulnerable and he's distracted, and then Superman just catches him. Like, it wasn't really developed, so it's not really intriguing. There's nothing interesting about Arm Shaky guy or creepy guy. They're just there to expose the personal conflict stuff, just to expose plot points. And that makes the plot not as... You kind of wish the plot was a little bit more interesting than that. That they had more meat or significance to it other than to expose other plot lines, that are something more meaningful, I guess. So that was maybe where some of the disappointment comes in, whereas other ones felt like the plot lines all kind of intersected, had meaning, value, added up to something, as opposed to... No, this was just here to reveal, like, yeah, there's rocks in town that are giving people powers, and there are criminals in the world that are figuring out Superman is not around as much. That's all they mean. That's it. They don't tie into anything greater than that. They're not being developed. That's it. Just a plot point. So, and then Lana and Lois, they'd met up, and basically just kind of a girl chat character moment about each of them seeing the positives in their relationship. So this leads us to kind of the epilogue of the episode, where General's at their house and Jordan's like, man, I used my laser eyes and I think I gave him powers. And General's like, no. It's not that. There's these yellow phosphorus rocks in town and they exploded near him, and that's what gave him powers. And immediately I went, okay, yep, that's what I thought was coming. I'm sure it's going to tie back to Superman in some way. Why wouldn't it? It would be weird if it didn't. And that was the plot of the first 3 seasons of Smallville. So that's where this is headed. And then it leads to a fight between Lois, Sam, and Clark, where Sam is saying the same stuff about responsibilities, do this, do that. And finally Lois steps in and is like, Dad, you were a bad dad. You said the same stuff to me when we were growing up, making excuses for why you weren't around. Clark's not doing that. He's trying to balance all of it. And he's actually here for the kids and not just for the greater good. That wasn't the choice you made, but that's the choice that he's making, and I'm glad that he's making it. And in relation to when you're dealing with in-laws, it's much better if the actual related people are the ones that are talking, not person talking to in-law. It's always better when it's the proper family member. So she chimes in, and it's always received better. So, and he seems to listen to it and understands better. Like, okay, they're living their life. I'm overstepping. I shouldn't be around, and I clearly crossed the line, and I'm not welcome here at this particular moment. So he leaves, and then Clark, trying to make up for lost time because Lois said some stuff about missing some dates, throws a nice romantic date out in the barn. They talk for a little bit, and then it kind of closes out with Sam calling Lois, hey, it would be helpful if Superman could join, but I want to talk to you. But Clark's actually the one that ends up answering the phone. And so Superman is going to go and help with them, cuts off his date a little bit early, but they had some time to drink some wine. He's off to help. And right as he gets off the phone, he pulls out his tags that he got a couple episodes back. The 7734 tags, or Hell, if you read it upside down, that he got from Captain Luthor. And clearly he's very conflicted on all this stuff, and he calls someone like, we need to start some new protocols in line to... Feels not so good for Superman. Wherever it's going, probably not the direction we want it to go. So anyway, in general, a couple new things that had me a little concerned for where they might be going. The villains weren't developed all that well, but still just really appreciating the characters. Like, I care about all of them. They're all developing. They all have a plot line. They all tie into what's going on in a way that I care about, that I'm interested in. And so thus far, 4 episodes, and that hasn't been a bad one or the weak one or anything like that. Like, maybe this is my least favorite of the bunch, but then again, that just might be level of expectation if I went into it not assuming it would be all that good, then being like, okay, but how's the second and third episodes going to be? And then they were good. And so then you go into this one assuming it's going to be good, and it was, so it didn't exceed my expectations like this previous stuff had. So, in general, that's where I landed on this one. I dug it. Another solid episode from Superman and Lois. Let me know what you thought down below in the comments section. And keep talking movies and TV too much. I wanted to say a little bit more, but I realized I didn't have anything else. Talk to you later.